Hello, my name is Mathias, and welcome to the GW3 edition of the FPL School podcast with me and, of course, my co-host Kevin, who is pretty happy with his triple captaincy choice. Last week, he triple captained Haaland, and now he's activated another chip for next week. Chips ahoy for Kevin, with the wildcard for next game week. So we're going to have a lot of interesting content here for you today, both the triple captaincy story of Kevin and also what he's looking to do with the wildcard. So there will be plenty of stuff to get into. So first, let's go to Kevin. How do you feel about using your wildcards in Game Week 2 and now Game Week 3? The first one, obviously, you've gotten the results already, so you should be happy about that. But how planned was this? Is it more spur of the moment? Is it just felt right? Like, what was the thought process going into using your chips in Game Week 2 and Game Week 3, pretty much?
I think it was just that the sort of rotation of fixtures for certain players, fixing some of the defensive issues that I have, and also just having a lot of dead weight in terms of a lot of players just not performing or getting the minutes and stuff like that. And I'm aware that a lot of these players, it's all about the fact that it's only been like one match day or two match days, and it will take time for some of them to get activated, including Daichi Kamado, who scored a brilliant goal against Norwich.
Yeah,
Sorry, Ian,
had an assist
good
as
friend
well.
of the channel. But yeah, I think mainly it was just to fix and plan ahead, and also to get in certain players that I ignored, Arsenal being one of the biggest ones that I've neglected because they had hard games, but uh, they seem to be fixture proof. And I think one of my favorite FPL assets, Bukayo Saka, has shown that he's fixture proof as well. So I think it just became time to shift certain players, get certain players in. And yeah, I think generally speaking, midfielders have completely wiped the floor with strikers lately. And I know that that can change very quickly. Um, but there's so many talismans, there's so many players that can cover other players that just make it like a fun option for me to wildcard. Also, there was a lot of price changes and stuff like that that I got myself caught up in. So with that as well, my team value's now gone up to 105 or 100.5 rather.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, it's given me a bit more flexibility in terms of long-term planning as well, because I know that a popular thing that people have been looking at is, a wild card in game week 4 or 6, but I feel like the players that I'm picking now are optimal to surpass those weeks and stuff like that too. So, uh, besides maybe not loving the fact that Aston Villa have hard fixtures coming up ish, but in
Mm.
game week 6 and 7, but if situation shouldn't be that hard, and Man United are kind of up and down anyway. So yeah, I think generally speaking, it just felt like the right time to sort of fix some of the top heavy nature of my team, and fix the defense, especially.
Yeah, speaking of your team, you can go actually looking into your team for this past game week, and it was a really good score, obviously. 90 points is fantastic in any game week, or usually at least. Some double game weeks you actually get more than 100 points or expected to, but for a single game week, 90 points is absolutely amazing, and that's what you got as well. And mostly that is down to Haaland getting 51 points. More than half of your points was Haaland. The triple captaincy chip was used perfectly. 17 points, you got proven right. Single game week, worked out. Really happy with that, or you should be really happy with that, obviously. But yeah, like I mentioned, top heavy team. You have Haaland getting 51 points, Salah 10 points, Son 16 points, and those are the three premium players that you have, and the rest are just trash, basically. I think Lewis was a bit unlucky. I think that was actually a good transfer from you. I think Lewis was really close. He blasted that shot into the bar when he easily could have scored. Could have had a clean sheet, obviously, as well, playing against Ipswich. So I think he was actually a pretty good player as well. But apart from that, the rest of your players are looking not so good. Isak is obviously one of the few exceptions. He is still a really good player and pretty expensive player as well. He just hasn't gotten it going so far. But there are a lot of like sticking points with your team. The Everton guys on the bench, Calvert-Lewin and Mikolenko. Woodford scored, but Leicester keep conceding every game. Crystal Palace haven't looked the best. Guehi is not getting his move to Newcastle anyway, or it seems like, so he's going to stay with Palace, who look pretty bad so far. Murphy is on borrowed time. If he's even that, he might even be dropped next game already. And Kunku has sadly been a huge disappointment so far this season. So yeah, there are plenty of like things that you need to switch with your team. So I actually fully backed you using the wildcard. I think that was the right decision, and you used it pretty early as well, like you said. So you got a lot of value back. But yeah, reflecting on Game Week 2 and also just your team selection from Game Week 1 as well. What is the stuff that you were close to doing at least that you wish you had done differently?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Saka versus Son, I obviously considered Saka for the longest time. I considered having an Arsenal defender because I had Gabriel for a long time as well. So not backing Arsenal despite their sort of weird fixtures is a bit annoying. But I think in terms of backing the teams, bless you. I think, yeah, it's a bit frustrating that I also didn't jump on the Pedro Porro train because I had Pedro Porro most of last season, even though I was told not to by a lot of people. So I feel kind of hard done by not having a Spurs defender or Coutinho Romero for that matter, because I know that he's always good for a headed goal, and of course it comes already in game week 2. He's pretty good at set piece goals and is always a threat. So it's a bit annoying not catching more of the points against Everton, which kind of sucks considering the fact that it's my team that I support. But other than that, I can't feel too hard done by. Um, it's so obvious that Cole Palmer is still a ridiculously good football player. I still think that his numbers will dwindle once Nkunku is properly integrated into the team because it seems like it's a lot of load management early doors, which,
Mm.
yeah,
Well,
fair. I guess
five
they don't
5 minutes
want to.
played the last
I
game.
don't I don't buy this bullshit thing that Nkunku's gonna like continuously be benched this entire season. No chance. Like that guy, you don't buy him specifically for 60 million. Like Mudryk is one thing because Mudryk they got fleeced in the deal. Nkunku was actually worth 60 million when they bought him, and I still think he is a 60 million player now. I think personally
Is he a
he's
Maresca
gonna
player though? That's my question because he wasn't brought in by Maresca.
But that's such utter bullshit considering the fact that
Yeah.
he's been performing like regardless of what he did against City, which again, do you blame him for not doing anything? Like no one did anything against City.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, if he got more than 7 minutes or whatever the hell he got against
Wolves.
Wolves, he probably would have scored in that game. So like
Yeah.
I personally think it's fine if people are wild carding him out or transferring him out to get, the Smith Rowes of the world, but don't get surprised if he starts delivering the goods when it comes into later on into the season because I think he's personally just being it's a bit of a time management thing where they're just making sure that he's ready to go. Sort of what I wish Barcelona are doing with Pedri, but nope, 90 minutes, let's go.
Yeah.
Hopefully your legs don't break. So like I still think that Nkunku could have value going forward. So I don't hate the pick. Murphy got super unlucky, and Isak both got super unlucky with Fabian Scher's bullshit in game week 1. And historically speaking, it seems like Eddie Howe can't do anything against his former club away from home. So like it's clearly just like how Barcelona couldn't win against Rayo until this year. This first time since 2018 seems to be that Eddie Howe can't get the win at Matilda D Stadium. So like it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, I got 90 points and I nailed my triple captain. So, and I'm
Yeah.
only like 30 points off our own mini league top. And the guy who's top knows nothing about football and just is completely casual and riding the luck. So, yeah. It's my cousin, by the way. So I feel like it's been a pretty random start,
Yeah.
to be honest.
hasn't been too bad, and the triple captaincy has helped you a lot, obviously. But you have also used that chip, so that is an extra at least 10 points that you're gonna lose at some point towards the end of the season. But just on the top of Nkunku, because I think currently, just when it comes to your wildcard team now, you only keep like 3 players, I think. Lewis, Salah, Haaland, and Valdimarsson, I guess, as a bench backup, and Pope, I think. So you're obviously dropping Nkunku, but you said earlier, you can imagine bringing him in again this season, and you think he's going to be having his moment at some point this season for sure.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the board seemed to be very on board, pun intended, to keep him going and get stuff going. Because, like, if you think back to his previous season last year, yeah, it was marred with injuries, but he did show up in random games to show his qualities. And obviously, in the friendlies, he did very well. And in the conference league, he scored a penalty and just looked, generally speaking, good. So, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Maresca keeps rotating players in and out. I think the only issue that I have now is that Cole Palmer is still Cole Palmer at the end of the day, and seems to be the only, like, the most nailed Chelsea player right now. Like, it's really bad that none of us seem to know whether Noni Madueke is actually going to start the next game despite getting a hat trick. Makes no fucking sense. It's sort of like De Serbi ball over there. Maybe it's an Italian thing. I don't know, but it makes no sense to me that we should be questioning whether Noni Madueke should start when the guy got a hat trick. But it is what it is, and it. Another point that I want to make is, this bullshit about does Nkunku not fit Maresca's style of football? Why did Maresca play with 2 cams against Wolves, and that is the game he chose? You know what? The guy who's naturally a cam, we shouldn't start him in this game. We'll rest him. So I don't believe that. If you're willing to play an 11 that can have 2 cams, then you play Nkunku and Palmer together, and that
Yeah.
would be absolutely magic,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
I
So,
mean, it did work out for them though in the end, but yeah.
yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of things can go certain ways. It doesn't mean that X player shouldn't be a part of it, or etc.
Yeah.
In that regards is how I view it. Um, I don't think like let's say Newcastle win like a 5-0 without Isak. This doesn't mean that Isak shouldn't be a part of starting 11. So for me personally, like, yes, maybe these first few weeks, whilst they're still assessing his injuries and stuff like that, and making sure he's match fit and all this type of stuff, fine, I get it. Stay away from him, but I think he'll eventually be all systems go. I think that's the player I'm the most annoyed about having to sell out of all the players that I have to sell.
Yeah.
Obviously, Isak too, which is a bit of a spoiler alert, I guess, but
Mm.
I don't have Isak going forward simply because I want to get Saka and some of these other players in. Uh, Obviously, that can still change. I haven't forgotten the fact that I either benched or transferred Isak out against Spurs last year when he got a brace or something. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's who he's
so
facing now
yeah,
as well.
so so yeah, I'm well aware that that game happened, and that Isak's also been super unlucky. Because of the first game where he did still get an assist, even though they were one man down for no reason because Fabian Schär is stupid, and yeah, again, the Eddie Howe voodoo, or hoodoo rather, against Bournemouth is not the it's unlucky.
Yeah.
And of course, typical Anthony Gordon bullshit for him to be the one to score, even though he notoriously struggles away from home. So, um, yeah, that's how I feel. I guess at the end of the day, it's been very consistent inconsistency from all the players. So it's hard to gauge, and I feel like a lot more casual players are doing well because it's sort of like the Euros fantasy, like, oh, France and Portugal defenders. That sounds like a good idea, even though both teams have some of the best attacking options. Nope, both teams ended up keeping clean sheets. It's the same thing that I feel with how Aston Villa didn't score against Arsenal is beyond me, considering the
Yeah.
fact that Rodgers gave Watkins it on a plate. Like, I
Yeah.
would bet like money that Watkins would score that 9 out of 10 times, and of course it's that 1-9 time, and then obviously I believe it's the same game where Raya goes absolutely insane with the double save as well. So
Yeah,
like like what can you say really? Because I think I would have a lot of people would have lost a lot of points if Arsenal had not kept the clean sheet, and there's some people who are doubled up on them by accidentally having Raya and a center back. So yeah, it's been a weird start, but I feel like my top heavy team pretty much
sure.
proved why it works because yeah, man, it's crazy to think, but I got like 70 points from the three players essentially,
Yeah,
if
almost
not
80
more.
even. Yeah,
Yeah.
close to 80. But yeah, Isak, interesting there. What's going to happen with him as well? Like you said. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what your team is looking like as well. But before we get to that, we're going to go through the teams of both Kimo, which is the first player we're going to look at, which is the third founding member of the FPL School podcast. He had an even better game week despite not using the triple captain, 94 points. You talked about Gordon, typical that he was the one to score, and he was actually the one to score for Kimo with 10 points here as well. Smith Rowe with 10 points. He got his goal for Fulham, got some bonus points on top of that. Pedro Porro, like you mentioned previously, he's looked good. Trent has looked amazing. Could have had even more points. Jota could have had even more points as well, I think. But he got 6 points. So all across the board, he got plenty of points this game week. This was the game week for anyone with Haaland and well, Salah got 10 points. But if you dropped Salah and had spread the money around like Kimo has done, you could have done really well this game week. And that's what he did. 94 points despite having basically 10 players because Kwanzaa didn't play and Cresswell came on and played like 2 minutes for West Ham, got 1 point. So yeah, 94 points, amazing for Kimo, obviously. He has done some pretty controversial stuff with his team for next game week as well. He hasn't used the wildcard, but he's done a -8, done 4 transfers. Do you think this team warrants a -8? I mean, obviously there are some issues here with Cresswell, Kwanzaa, Solanke, Barco all sort of not playing currently. But yeah, looking at this team, do you think it warrants that much of a surgery?
No, didn't he have like a free transfer going in
He
anyways?
had 2 free transfers and scored 94 points and took a -8 doing 4 transfers. We're gonna look into that later, exactly what that is, but yeah,
Felt a bit excessive to be honest.
kind of crazy. But so far so good for Kimo. He's done really well for himself. Having
Mhm.
Haaland obviously is the main thing, even though he didn't triple captain him. Imagine if he triple captain him, he would have had 17 more points. That would have been 111 points, which would have been absolutely amazing for him. But yeah, he is also, like I said, someone that prefers to use his triple captaincy. If he's going to use it in a single game week, he's going to use it in the final game week of the season, which is usually a really high scoring game week. So I don't really mind that tactic either, even though now we know, obviously, Haaland triple captain would have been a really, really good idea, potentially the best idea for triple captaincy this season. But yeah, either way, fantastic score for Kimo, and I think his team is actually pretty good. I think we're going to get to his transfers and sort of go through them bit by bit later on, but I don't think it was warranted. But I do like a lot of picks here. I like Trent. I like Pedro Porro, kind of, even though the fixtures are getting worse. Smith Rowe has obviously been great. Rogers hasn't done much yet, but he is looking really good as well in open play. Plays every single game. Son is obviously expensive, but he got 16 points. So Son has actually matched Saka so far. You mentioned that you didn't like you wish you had Saka, but he and Son has scored the same amount of points for the same amount of price. So technically, you haven't really lost anything from going with Son over Saka. Jota's also looked good, but Jota, that's the other thing as well. Chiesa has basically confirmed that he's going to Liverpool. He has gotten a here we go from Romano and stuff. So we know Federico Chiesa, another attacker, is coming to Liverpool. What do you make of that, and what do you think Chiesa will do in terms of minutes? Who do you think he'll take the most minutes from? Do you think Salah potentially will lose some minutes? Because Chiesa is usually right wing. Do you think Salah is someone that could be subbed off at like 70, 80 minutes now, or do you still think he's going to be a 90-minute man?
I think it's sort of like the center forward and left wing position could like he has played right wing in the past and was a successful right winger as that. But like I'll be completely honest, I don't understand why Liverpool went for him. I think it was
Yeah.
just to uh slightly piss off Barcelona, and I think it's slightly also just to make sure that they have cover because sometimes the players can be wildly inconsistent. But like when you have a Gakpo who's hitting like his stride and not getting minutes, you have a Diogo Jota who's playing pretty good football right now. You have Mo Salah who's playing well. I guess it's sort of like who do you play at? And you have Luis Diaz who's playing like incredibly well too. So like I personally don't think that I think it was more greed than anything, and also because they were able to get him at such a low price because his wages are so high. Because a lot of people don't seem to be aware that he was one of Juventus' best played players, and that's why they were like so easily ready to offload him, even though he had a year left on his contract. So I think Liverpool may have made a mistake by getting him in because it's going to hamper some of the progress of the other players, but. I think for Chiesa himself, this is a very make or break sort of situation. I really hate to make this likeness, but it's very much a Mario Balotelli situation. Like Balotelli went to Liverpool and his career just went downhill because of that, because he wasn't able to perform at Anfield and for the Liverpool Merseyside club. So it's a big, big responsibility on Chiesa to basically hit the ground running. But the question is, how are you going to get the ground running when all the players who are playing ahead of you
Yeah.
are going absolutely ham? I'll be completely honest with you. I feel like Jota's always an injury away from being out for like 3 weeks, anyways, and that's sort of how Chiesa gets us in. Um, it's I guess Arne Slot, if he wants to rotate a lot, he can. He is an option to give Salah some rest, but I thought the whole point of Harvey Elliott is to give Salah rest and
Yeah.
sort of play at right wing cam sort of positions anyway. So, um, yeah, again, you're hampering a lot of different players by adding yet another player in a position you don't need. And I felt that,
Yeah.
generally speaking, Chiesa was just an excessive move for them. I mean, we thought Gakpo was an
Yeah.
excessive move
That's what I was going to
for.
bring up as well.
Uh, so like, what's the point in Chiesa? I'll be completely honest. I think it might have been also just like another shiny toy for Liverpool fans to sort of, ogle about and be happy about, even though I feel like there are other positions they could have easily
I mean,
tried to get players in. So
I guess it could be sort of long-term-ish. Chiesa isn't that young anymore, but it could be sort of like a long-term-ish replacement for Salah eventually at right wing.
yeah,
With Salah potentially leaving next summer even because his contract is running up. Both
true.
Salah, Alisson, and Van Dijk's contracts are running up. They also brought in Mamardashvili as a goalkeeper. He's been loaned back again to Valencia, but he's going to be the starting goalkeeper probably from next season. And they're probably going to move on from Alisson potentially because of that as well. So maybe I think that could potentially be like a more like long-term move, Chiesa. But in terms of minutes, I think obviously he's going to have to play some part, and that's going to take down some of the minutes from Liverpool, whether that's Diaz, whether that's Jota, whether that's Szoboszlai dropping out and Diaz playing in centrally, or Chiesa playing centrally, or even Jota playing centrally. I don't really know, but I think I'm not as confident in at least Jota. I think Salah is still going to be not really affected that much, even though Chiesa is pretty good at that position. I think Salah, his ego is too big as well. Like he is super mad whenever he gets subbed off. That actually happened with Trent as well when he was subbed off now early. He was really stroppy and mad as well on the bench. But I think Salah is just... We've seen him take penalties despite not being the best penalty taker at Liverpool, and we are going to see him start despite them having several other options. But he's still the best player at Liverpool. So I don't think Salah owners should be worried, but I think Jota owners should be a bit more worried. I'm not quite as sold on Jota anymore with Chiesa coming in as it was before Chiesa came in, at least when it comes to that. But Jota is one of the players that Kimo's actually kept, and I think he's still a pretty good keep for now because Chiesa is going to need some time to be integrated into the squad as well. So I'm still jealous of people with Trent and Jota, and Kimo has that. But I do have Salah, so I'm happy that I have him at least. But yeah, that's Kimo, 94 points for him. Let's move on to a manager that got even more points, the manager of the week in the FPL Scope Mini League. And so I always say, if you want to be the manager of the week, you have to join the FPL Scope Mini League. The league code is hpxeri. And if you join the Mini League and you have the highest score in one particular game week, you will be featured on the podcast, just like Jonathan Mayock has, with 113 points, -4 from doing 2 transfers. Kwanzaa to Robinson, which was really successful. 0 points for Kwanzaa, 7 points for Robinson. Huge profit there. But also Solanke to Xerxes, which was kind of unnecessary, I think. I think Xerxes was kind of the wrong pick as well there. Could have gone with someone cheaper. Or even if he had stayed at that same price, he could have gone with someone different as well. I don't really quite understand the Xerxes thing, especially with Haaland coming back pretty soon. And Man United haven't really looked too good early on either, but he was the match winner in the first game, to be fair. He was close to scoring again, had that really weird goal, or I guess he wasn't close because he was offside, but Garnacho was close to scoring at least. The ball was going over the line regardless anyway, so they feel sort of hard done by from that. But overall, this team, obviously triple captain Haaland, 51 points, has been a huge success story this game week. Raya in goal with 10 points. Raya has been terrific as a goalkeeper, both in terms of FPL and in terms of a real-life goalkeeper. He's been absolutely fantastic this season in the first 2 game weeks, and he's the biggest reason Arsenal have kept the clean sheet. So he fully deserves his 10 points, including the misses from Watkins, which were pretty bad. But yeah, really solid score overall. It's just Eze 2 points, Garnacho 1 point, Xerxes 1 point. That is letting him down, but at the same time, pretty weak bench as well. So there are some potential changes that can be made for next week as well that we'll get to eventually. But looking at this team, obviously have to be pretty happy with game week 2. What do you think of the team overall and going forward as well? If you had this team yourself, I assume you wouldn't wildcard if you had this team yourself, or
Yeah.
Or would you wildcard to get in Salah? Because Salah's not in the team. That's the big.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, and I think generally speaking, some of his players are good. I think Garnacho is one of those sort of iffy ones currently because it seems to be that he's a super sub. I don't personally understand it either, but
he should start over Rashford for sure.
Yeah, but I also think it's sort of that they want to get Rashford going, and Diallo is sort of looking. I mean, I thought Diallo's looked good. I feel like Diallo's been looking good. I feel like Garnacho's been looking good as well. I guess with Rashford, it's one of those like he's one of our highest paid players. Like we got to get him going. But I think honestly, just go with Amad Diallo and Garnacho going forward. And rotate between Haaland and Xerxes. But
and I did mention also Garnacho that he was like this close to scoring. It's just Xerxes got in the way after trying to get the goal first as well. So it could have been even higher if Garnacho had gotten that goal as well.
Yeah, but I don't understand why you would bring in Xerxes when you had very obvious striker choices, in my opinion, over him, because we haven't seen Xerxes start, and I think it's just a little bit too early doors, or maybe a bit knee jerk, being like, oh, he scored in the game, so he'll start the next one, but then he didn't even get to start because Ten Hag's mega mind. So I think generally speaking, I don't hate this team at all. I think there are some interesting players there, including Eze, who I think has been extremely unlucky this whole season, really. And now, of course, goes crazy against Norwich. So confidence could be at a new high and all this type of stuff. So, I think I would look into maybe selling, maybe Wildcard.
Really?
Like, I don't hate the team. Like, you could go a week without Salah and all this type of stuff, but Salah loves scoring against Man United. And as someone who owned him that one random week where he, where a lot of people had sold Salah before the United game, and he absolutely, humdingered them. I think Salah is. I told you before. Salah and Haaland are two mainstays for me the entire season, and
it's interesting.
Even after a wild card, they're both the only ones who sort of remained in the team. So I mean, Wout Feisch, the legend who scored but was on my bench, is actually still in my team.
He's still in your team as well. That's true.
Even though there's rumors that he might be leaving, blah blah blah.
Yeah, that's another good thing about wildcarding this week, by the way, is the fact that the transfer deadline day is on Friday, so that's before the actual deadline for game week 3. So you're gonna know every single transfer. You're gonna know if Nedeljkovic is going to be a nice right back for Aston Villa, or if they've brought in a new right back and he's not worth that much. you're going to know if there's any other new players that have come in that you think look really good going forward as well. So that's a huge benefit to wildcarding this week and potentially next week as well. But yeah, just venture a guess on which team this manager supports. I might answer some stuff, probably.
I'm assuming a United fan.
Yeah. The name of the team is Ugarte Party, who's joining Man United now. So yeah, that's probably why. Probably hyped from seeing Xerxes score in the first game week and brought him in. So that's probably the reason for both Garnacho and Xerxes. But on the Garnacho point as well, I think it's kind of interesting because he's played like 30 minutes in both games. And both games he's been like top 2 or top 3 for Man United in terms of expected goal involvement still, even though he's played like very few minutes. So I think whenever Garnacho is going to play regularly, and I think that's going to be sooner rather than later because he is probably their best attacking player, probably, I think. Well, Bruno Fernandes is better, but apart from Bruno Fernandes, he's the best attacking player. So I think he's going to be a really good option as well for 6.5 pretty soon. Potentially even, he might even drop in price, I think, or if he hasn't already. So he's someone to watch for sure. So I don't think that's a major issue with this team. Xerxes is more like the potential player that would actually sell despite bringing him in for a hit now and not gaining anything from it. I think that is the way that I would go. And we'll get to that when we get to the plans for this manager of the week pretty much later on in the podcast. But speaking of the future, we're going to look into the future now and do some fixture, looking at the fixture ticker and see which teams have the best fixtures. You said Aston Villa might have some tough fixtures, but immediately they are really, really good. Leicester away, Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away. All 4 fixtures sound really, really good for those teams. All those 4 teams have looked really bad defensively so far. So I think Aston Villa players attacking-wise, Watkins, for example, Morgan Rogers, for example, are really, really good options. You have a lot of different teams there. I think there are some interesting things to make note of as well when it comes to offensive prowess. Not this game week with Arsenal away, but for the next 2 game weeks for Brighton, Ipswich at home, really good chance to score goals. Nottingham Forest are actually a pretty good defense, so that might not be the best. I mean, it's still at home to like a bottom tier side, so I think that's still a good fixture. Chelsea have struggled defensively. Spurs historically have struggled defensively, but this season they've been pretty good. And then Newcastle have struggled defensively as well. So I think Brighton, despite being pretty low on the table, have some nice options potentially as well for the future. But for you, as someone that is wildcarding, what stands out to you in terms of the fixtures? Obviously, Aston Villa, like I mentioned, have some really good fixtures. I'm assuming you have some Aston Villa players in your team, potentially. But what else stands out to you, and which teams do you like to target, judging from the fixtures or from a fixture perspective, I guess?
I think it's a bit silly that Liverpool are so low down just because they're playing Man United away. Like, I get it. It's historically a difficult match and all this type of stuff. So, yeah, I still think that loading up on Liverpool players is the right move, especially considering the fact that after this United game, it's Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, amazing home matches for Mo Salah and the lot, and then Wolves away, always a toughie, but Liverpool will absolutely smash them. Crystal Palace away, not the best, but they're gonna beat Chelsea. Like, unless Cole Palmer and Nkunku and all those guys start cooking, like, I feel like targeting Liverpool players is going to be sort of like my aim. I had a draft where I had double up on him and Jota, but Saka feels a little bit more safe simply because of the new Chiesa news and stuff like that. But other than that, I think Fulham players look good, you know, in the Robinson and Smith Rowes of the world. So congratulations to everyone who actually showed belief to them. I think Mathias has been pretty unlucky too. But I think there's just something about Smith Rowe that's looking very good. They seem to like giving him the ball in advanced positions because they know that he can score. And I think Arsenal are going to really regret actually selling him more than they will regret selling Nketiah, who I think is, the less I say, the better. And I think, maybe I've
Watch
seen
Nketiah score a hat-trick against Leicester, by the way. It's probably going to happen.
Yeah. So I think one of those things that I've seen in a lot of drafts, or rather not in any drafts is Leif Davis, when Ipswich have a pretty okay-ish run of games.
Yeah,
I
I mean
think,
second best in
I
this.
mean, they are complete kamikaze football and all this type of stuff, but they're still capable of scoring. So
Yeah.
I, I I think having one of their players could be a fun little gamble or save you some cashish. But
How about
other than
Smodix
that,
in midfield? 6.0 midfielder.
say that again.
Smodix, Sammy Smodix,
Yeah,
top
Sami
scorer
Smodic
from
is a
Smodic or
wonderful player. Wish he didn't go to Ipswich. Should have gone to some other club that would actually
Norwich.
benefit from having a guy who can score 30-ish goals in the championship. But considering this fact that Ipswich will be in the championship next year, fair enough.
I mean, they're signing that guy from Sunderland as well, aren't they? Clark was the name? Jack Clark?
Yeah, who's pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, they're actually making some signings, and I think it will be
Yeah,
interesting to see Ipswich now because they played Liverpool and Man City, so we don't really know what to expect still from Ipswich. They've obviously been promoted twice in a row, so it's going to be tough for them regardless in the Premier League. But I think now against Fulham at home, their first like proper home game against a team that they could potentially beat. I think that's going to be interesting to see how they respond to that challenge, and also how Fulham respond to that challenge as well. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting games from this upcoming game week, actually, to see how Ipswich stand in the table, and also how Fulham are looking as well, because that can affect what we do with the likes of Smith Rowe, Robinson, and those guys going into the future, because this is obviously the best fixture that they have as well in the near future, Fulham. So that will be a really interesting game for me, at least. You have Chelsea as well, who have some really good fixtures. They do have Liverpool away in game week 8, but that shouldn't really matter too much in terms of who you bring in now. They have just, yeah, really good fixtures in general, or pretty decent fixtures at least. No like home run fixtures. They have no Ipswich, no Everton, no Southampton, no Leicester types of fixtures, but I think they look really good. So Palmer is obviously a really nice player to have there. We've tried and failed with Nkunku so far. Are there any other Chelsea picks that you could potentially look into? Any players that stand out to you from Chelsea?
yeah, Victor Osimhen when he signed. Just kidding. He's gonna be like 10 million as well, which will be so annoying if they
If it goes,
price
though.
him. If he goes, of course.
Could also go
I
to
still think
Saudi,
that
apparently.
Noni Madueke, if he gets the minutes, has always shown that he's capable of a goal or assist.
Yeah.
So I like the looks of him. Pedro Neto, if he like, I think a lot of this with Chelsea is just knowing which players are nailed. I don't hate Levi Cole at 4.5. I think Sanchez is a bit of a weird one because
Yeah.
yes, Maresca said that he's likes him and whatever, and it's going to start him in the league. But in terms of these sort of possession style football, he wants to have a goalkeeper that's good with their distribution, and Philip
Yeah.
Jurgensen is actually that. So I could see Sanchez being a bit of a riskier pick going forward.
Yeah.
So I'd rather
I
go
mean,
with
Sanchez did actually make that a thing in the game against Wolves as well. The second goal was actually really nicely set up by him. The pass to Jackson first that went into
of
Palmer
course.
and then lobbed the goalkeeper. That was actually pretty impressive from Sanchez. That's one of the few good things I've seen from Sanchez, actually, because I'm not the biggest fan of his usually. But yeah, like you said, I think he's a bit more risk, and I think the centre backs, especially Colwell, I think is going to be pretty nailed. You also have Fofana, who's injury prone, obviously. So yeah, I think the defenders are pretty interesting. But offensively, any other players you're potentially looking at? Madueke, you mentioned. Pedro Neto, for example, he's a new signing. We know Maresca signed him as well. He's been getting on and played some minutes. Joe Felix is a new signing as well. They have so many options in attack or in midfield. So many 6.5 midfielders. Are there any of those players that you would be confident in going with going forward? Or how would you rank them if that's the case anyway?
I mean, I think after his hat trick, it's got to be like Madueke. It's like Madueke, Neto, maybe Nkunku, Felix, like that. But it should
Mudryk
really
last.
be. I still think Nkunku. Like again, I think people are just overreacting over the fact that it's just been a couple. It's quite literally been 2 matches, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's never gonna play for Chelsea again." Like, where are you getting this from? Like, he killed it in the preseason. He did. He scored a penalty and looked good in the Europa Conference League match, and I still think that there's a lot of belief there that he can come good, especially if Osimhen doesn't come in. If Osimhen or like Tony or
Yeah.
whatever these fringe strikers are trying to like panic buy, if none of them come in, I think Nkunku should get more belief and will start banging it in the Prem again. So like I think I don't even understand why fall. I feel like there's like some money laundering something going on with the Joao Felix thing because
Yeah.
that purchase made no sense, especially considering the fact that we've heard nothing about Mudryk and Sterling is such a non-factor anyways because
Mhm.
they have 5 million players in both positions of left wing and right wing. So Sterling is sort of a foregone conclusion at that rate. So for me, I still think that Nkunku has some weight to him. It's just judging on based on the most previous game, Madueke probably has more legs to stand on considering the fact that he scored a hat trick. But again, we all don't seem to know if he's starting the next match. Whilst if I was a manager and a player scored a hat trick, you best believe I'm going to let him have the chance to play again the next
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Arsenal as well. They have some really good fixtures. They have some tougher fixtures in between them as well, with Spurs away and City away. You mentioned Saka. Any other Arsenal standouts for you? David Raya, is that someone that you're considering? He's been so good so far, but they've also been kind of lucky not to concede, like you mentioned. So any defenders or Raya or any other Arsenal players that stand out to you that you could potentially look into getting?
I mean, spoiler again, but I currently have Raya and Saka.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a question of whether I get Kai Havertz or not because he seems to be
Hmm.
in a good spirits and is not cheap, but not expensive either. He's like a step below in regards to that. So it's all depends. I still think Saka seems to be the one who's going to be on penalties as well for the team. So like I like that. I like having a player with pen options. And I mean, if you look at my team, one, two, three, four, yeah, four potential penalty takers, five if you count Joao Pedro, who I'm not spoiler, but I'm not starting this next week because it is against Arsenal at the Emirates, and they've sort of made it a fortress lately. So, yeah, yeah, I still think that Saka is the obvious one. I think Odegaard's has been kind of unlucky not to get more
Mm.
goals contributions, but uh, sorry, I got to go with the hot hand, and the hot hand is Saka.
Yeah.
Classic Arteta to play him until he breaks or until he continues hobbling for like 40 minutes out of the 90. So, yeah, I think I got to ride the wave and go with Saka. And I think, you know what? I think I need to give Arsenal the benefit of the doubt, especially against Spurs. But yeah, the City match, that's where I kind of go like, oh, that could like I know it ended in a draw last year at the Emirates, did it? I
Yeah, it
felt
was
like
one draw,
both.
one win.
Yeah.
That was
Uh
where Arsenal celebrated like crazy for getting a draw against Man City, and
yeah,
then they
yeah,
lost the league by 2 points.
yeah. Loser mentality. Anyways, yeah. So that's the only thing that sort of like scares me a little bit off Saka, but I think just post that so many good games and I think Leicester Southampton, oh my
Yeah,
God, if I could triple captain, I would triple captain one of those players again. So
I mean that's why a
yeah,
lot of people look into Wildcard and Gaming 6 to bring in a lot of Arsenal players once they have those
yeah.
fixtures.
I mean, I get it. Arsenal have good fixtures from then on. Liverpool have pretty decent fixtures there. City sort of look nice going forward as well. So it's going to be interesting. But do I feel bad about leaving Son in the dust? Not really.
Yeah, I mean he provided 16 points for you this past game week, so he actually served you well for what he did.
Yeah, of course. But
18 points
at
over
the
two
same
game
time, I
weeks.
do not love his matches.
Yeah, and he was kind of lucky as well. He got a goal gifted from Pickford, and he got to play striker because Solanke was injured. And if he hadn't played striker, I think he would have struggled more as well. So Solanke is another one of those players that has been dropped now, which is for good reason. Their fixtures are bad. He's still not fully fit to play. We don't really know if he's back yet. But I think he's also someone that could potentially be really, really good eventually in the season. And I think those players that are sort of have failed you at the start of the season, they are usually like people are more reluctant to bring them back in again later on in the season. So I think the likes of Nkunku and Solanke could be really nice options eventually this season when people have written them off because they have bad experiences with them. So you should keep those guys in mind in the future at least. But for now, obviously, wildcarding, no Nkunku, no Solanke. Seems like a pretty good option, I think. But let's go on to some more current plans. I usually go with your plans first, but since you have the wildcard, we're going to save it for last. I'm also going to compare it to my own wildcard drafts that I did earlier this week as well. So first, let's start with Kimo's current plans, and he's actually done 4 transfers already. Like I mentioned previously in the podcast, he's done a -8 to do 4 transfers, and those 4 transfers are as follows. He's done Anthony Gordon despite scoring and having a home game, which he's usually pretty good at. He sold him to bring in Semenyo. I'm a huge fan of Semenyo, so I don't really begrudge him for that, honestly, myself. And it's basically to get money as well, which means that he can go from Son to Palmer. That costs a bit of money, and Palmer seems like a better option than Son. I think you'd agree as well. He's done Kwanzaa, who is obviously not really a starter anymore. Sold him for Nedeljkovic from Aston Villa. And then the final thing he did was Solanke to Watkins. And that means that he has 8 really, really good attackers, and he has to bench Isak against Spurs. And that was basically my main drawback to his transfer dealings. I think he could have saved the Watkins transfer for next week and just done a -4. Because he needed to do Nedeljkovic to have 3 starting defenders because he had Cresswell, Barco, and Kwanzaa. But I think he could have saved the Watkins and potentially also the Gordon Semenyo transfer. I think he could have saved both those transfers and just done. He actually wouldn't have had enough money to do Kwanzaa or Son to Palmer, I guess. But yeah, I think he could have at least not done the Watkins transfer and waited for next week to do the Watkins transfer. Seeing as Isak is still a pretty good option, I think, from this game week. But yeah, looking at the transfers, looking at the team, with Gordon, Son, Kwanzaa, Solanke back in the team, how would you have done it yourself? And what do you rate Kimo's transfer dealings as well on top of that?
No, I like the players that he brought in. Can't wait for Semenyo to blank against Everton.
Famous last words.
Palmer, good choice. Watkins, good choice. Not so sold on the Aston Villa defender simply because there's talks that Konsa might get to play right back, which is.
I mean, Emery has said that he prefers to play him as centre back this season, but if he has to, I think he could potentially go to him at right back. And also the fact that they're looking to bring in GW3, and we still don't know if they're going to get a replacement at right back or not, because they still need a right back. Mathias isn't that good, it would make sense for him to buy a right back. So on a wildcard, I think it's interesting to have Nedeljkovic until the deadline, but before the deadline has passed, the transfer deadline that is, I would really not bring in Nedeljkovic myself. But yeah, go on, I guess.
Yeah, I don't understand how you can be Egyptian, see Salah score in 2 games running, see the potential that he's got in terms of that he looks like he's going to haul every single week at this rate, and still not try and break the bank for him. I think you have completely forgone the fact that you're Egyptian. I do not rate you. I do not like but I think it's crazy that he's bending over backwards to fix the team in many ways, but not to bring in Salah, who I feel is looking like a necessity at this point. I know that he must have done a lot of this before the Chiesa move was finalized and all this type of stuff. But yeah, I think he could have easily have forgone some of these moves and just waited a little bit. I think some of it I understand is in terms of losing value and stuff, because I feel that Gordon is actually about to lose value, and therefore I think so. I think there's some wild players that are due a price change and stuff like that. So
yeah, he's actually dropping.
Yeah, because wasn't Watkins also dropping in price or something?
That's the thing. He brought in Watkins, and now Watkins is really close to dropping in price. So he could have especially waited for that.
Yeah.
for that reason. But maybe Watkins will. I think Watkins is a really good pick this week. Don't get me wrong. I think Leicester away, that's a really good pick. But with the -4, he's basically banking on Watkins getting 4 more points than Isak this game week. He's going to make that up with Isak playing Spurs at home because he's benching Isak. So for that reason, I don't really understand the move. But yeah, Watkins could all of a sudden bang. He could have that Brighton-like performance to get like 20 points, and maybe Kimo will be vindicated in the end. But I think it's just really risky. In terms of projected points, it's not projected that Watkins will get 4 or more points than Isak. So I don't really understand the move from that point of view, especially seeing as, yes, he's dropping in price as well, so he's not even gaining anything when it comes to price changes. And he has 0.4 in the bank as well, so it doesn't really matter that much. You mentioned Salah, and I guess to get Salah, he would have had to probably potentially drop Isak, I guess, to someone like Joao Pedro, and then he could have done Son to Salah, I guess. That could have been an option for him. But it's probably not like super important to get it this week, I guess. It is Salah against Man United. We've seen him do well against Man United in the past, but it's Man United away, so maybe he could have waited for game week 4 to bring in Salah. But now it's going to be difficult, I think, with the players that he has and the fact that he has 0 free transfers left as well. So yeah. Yeah, any other thoughts when it comes to Kimo's team? What do you think about his team overall, looking at the starting lineup and the bench?
Yeah, I mean, pretty sexy. Not gonna sit here and lie to you.
Ooh.
I'm not a fan of benching Isak. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds a little bit crazy to me considering I don't even have him, but I
yeah.
think that's more long term. But I think you should bench one of the either Semenyos or Rogers of the world and just play Isak because
Hmm.
he's on pens. Spurs are kind of erratic in terms of how they play, especially away from home, it seems like. Newcastle are always a good home team to you know to go with. So again, I think he might have been a bit hasty with the Gordon move. Solanke, I get, but yeah, I think he's second Gordon against Spurs isn't the worst options to have. So it seems a bit
Not sure.
it seems a bit like a harsh thing to do, and I think the worst thing that can happen with Isak is benching him for a haul. So this could be the haul. Don't do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'd lean that way as well, especially seeing as he has Watkins now already. Rogers, you can hope that he just assists Watkins and Watkins gets the points instead. And I know Rogers is like the shiny new toy, but I think Isak is just too good to bench, especially against Spurs, who at least last season weren't that good defensively. And we saw last season what Isak did to Van de Ven, who's a terrific defender, but Isak just absolutely destroyed him last season and scored a brace in that game. So yeah, I think I would have started Isak as well. There's another big thing here that we haven't discussed either, and I'm going to see if you notice what it is first. Is there anything else in particular from this team that you've noticed? Not in terms of transfers, not in terms of who's starting. There's another decision that we haven't really talked about this game week either.
With he's only captaining the one player he has playing at home.
He's captaining Palmer, yeah. He's not captaining
Yeah,
Haaland.
yeah.
Yeah, we haven't gone to your team yet, but I'm pretty sure you're going to captain Haaland. What do you think about captaining
I
Palmer?
actually have no idea who I'm captaining, to be
Okay,
honest. So
so
I am stuck between Saka and Palmer myself, actually.
Saka and Palmer, no Haaland.
Yeah, yeah.
After triple captain, 51 points.
Oh, 100%. I just think that West Ham look a little bit better now. So it's like one of those things
Oh,
where,
yeah.
yeah, he'll probably score a
Interesting.
goal, maybe score a second goal. If I was at the Etihad, bro, of course I'd captain him because it's in London, and all this type of shit. Are we gonna try and look for? You know what? I'll take that outside of the podcast. Um, yeah, I just think that these two players are playing at home and have decent fixtures. I don't think West Ham
Okay.
is, no offense, going to be the most difficult fixture for um, City. And Haaland's looking great, 4 goals. it seems like a foregone conclusion that I'd go for him, but I'm stuck between picking a midfielder as well because if either score the same amount of goals as Haaland, it's reps. You know what I mean? Like, it's extra points and all this type of
Yeah,
stuff. And
I guess. I mean,
so do I go with one penalty taker? Do I go with another penalty taker? Or do I go with another penalty taker in Haaland, Palmer, or Saka? I guess that's what we'll use the rest of this podcast to figure out. Because
yeah.
I am really stuck between those two mainly, but
Okay, that's very
as
interesting
some
because
as someone who is counter picking players because I'm counter picking people and teams, maybe I should just captain Holland because people aren't all aboard the Holland train. But yeah,
okay, because the team you sent me, you actually had Haaland Captain. I think that was just from last week. I guess maybe you hadn't changed it yet. But for me, I think Haaland is the best captain's option this week because I've seen City and specifically Haaland against West Ham in the past. He's always had a great time against West Ham, but now there is Kilman, there is potentially Todibo and Mavropanos as well. So maybe it will be tougher for him. It is Lopetegui as well. But I think West Ham have conceded enough chances the last few game weeks for me not to be that confident in West Ham. And like I said, Haaland, he scored in, I think in the same fixture last season, he scored just one goal, but he had like 5 like big missed chances. He should have had like 4 goals that game week. That was the game week where a lot of people went for Son as a differential captain, and Haaland definitely should have punished them with like 3 or 4 goals in that game, but he just got the 1 goal. And I think the same could happen this game. I think City have just looked so good so far, and I think West Ham have looked good, obviously beats Palace and stuff, but I think Haaland is just too good, and especially with the form that he's in and what he showed against Ipswich, but his finishing as well. Like the final goal was like not really a typical Haaland goal outside the box and stuff.
yeah,
I think he's just too good not to captain this week. So I was really surprised to see Kimo captain Palmer rather than Haaland, and I'm also very surprised to hear that you're considering Saka and Palmer and not Haaland mainly as well this week. But that's just my opinion, I guess. But yeah, that's interesting when it comes to captaincy. We'll talk more about it with your team as well when we get to that. But before then, we have to look at the manager of the week as well. We don't really have to, or we have to, but it's a pleasure to look at it as well because it's an interesting team, and there are some options here as well. I think Garnacho. I actually looked into I thought I was doing the Xerxes move because I think selling Xerxes makes more sense than Garnacho because like I said, Garnacho is someone that could potentially play regularly, I think, pretty soon. But Rodgers is the talk of the town, so I guess that makes more sense. You could also do Xerxes to draw Pedro as well. I think would be a really good option as well. Obviously, you have to get rid of Barco, who's just on the bench helping no one. The bench is pretty weak already with Barco, Thomas, and Jebison. None of those guys are going to play much. So yeah, Barco to Pau Torres or potentially Nedeljkovic if he is ready to play as well. But just the one free transfer, obviously, so not much you can do here. But I think I would lean Xerxes to draw Pedro, but that is also something that you don't have to do this week because Joao Pedro has Arsenal away, which is obviously a really tough fixture. Looking at this team yourself, what do you think of the team going forward, and what do you think you would do if you were in this manager's position as well?
yeah, but scary days with Pedro Porro going forward because of Spurs' sort of inconsistent calendar going forward. But other than that, I think it's a mixture of like good players, great players, and fantastic players. It's just the question of whether Xerxes is worth it, like with
Yeah,
him being a little bit of a unknown commodity and all this type of stuff. Yeah, it's not like he could easily be Juan Pedro next week and all this type of stuff. So for me, I'd probably stand pat, leave the team as it is, hope some of these players get the opportunity to play. And next week, depending on how many free transfers he has, I think it'll be true then. You can sort of fix things. It'll be also going into the international break as well, right? So
yeah,
going into the international break with 2 free transfers is always a nice option. So yeah, I'd say just stand pat.
yeah. I mean, that's the main option that I've listed as well. Just stand pat. You have a pretty good team this week. No reason to do changes. I guess it is the double Man United against Liverpool that makes me pause a little bit. I personally think
Of course.
Porro against Newcastle isn't the worst. Newcastle haven't really been so good, haven't been that good so far, both in terms of scoring goals. They haven't looked too good. They scored 1 goal in each game. And also in terms of conceding goals as well, they've looked pretty susceptible to concede, even though they kept the clean sheet against Southampton, obviously. But they conceded a lot of chances in that game, so I think Porro could be a good offensive option, I think, for that game. For that game. But yeah, I think as well, just standing pat is the best option. That usually is the best option as well. But I think the team is looking pretty good, and I would personally captain Haaland, even though others would potentially captain Palmer. But that's just something that this manager has to take into account for themselves, I guess. But yeah, it's just the bench options in defense. I think Saliba, Robinson, and Pedro Porro are all safe to start this week, so I don't think it's like a major issue that you need to deal with immediately. But potentially save a transfer, and then next week you could potentially downgrade Xerxes to João Pedro and then get enough money to upgrade someone like Barco to a viable defender, whether that's Rico Lewis or if it's someone more expensive that you can get in. I think that would be what I would do for the next 2 game weeks, I think. But yeah, that is the manager of the week. And like I said at the start of the podcast, or when we introduced the manager of the week, you can also be the manager of the week if you join the FPL Scope Mini League, and the league code is hpxeri. And yeah, if you get the highest score next game week, you'll be featured on the podcast in 2 weeks when we're back from the international break, pretty much. Now let's move on to the main event. The Wildcard activated Kevin's personal team. Let's look at it. This is the team. You actually have a 4-5-1 combination currently, because we mentioned João Pedro, who's a nice player for the future, but he plays Arsenal away in this game week, so he's probably better to be benched. But you have a bit of a wildcard dilemma, I guess, which is easier now than when we discussed it earlier because of the Chiesa addition to Liverpool, so it seems less important. But first and foremost, before I go into my qualms with the team, I guess, the things that I would potentially change, just go through the team and what your thought process is with the main players basically from the team, and what you've been thinking, and who have been the most important players to bring in for you, and how do you look at it from like a top heavy perspective, because it's still pretty top heavy, but now we have more rounded out, cheaper, or in terms of the cheap assets, they are actually pretty good assets now. So yeah, what do you think of your team, and what made you choose the players that you chose?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I ignored because I fucking hate Marco Silva is Fulham players. Good fixtures. They're looking very vibesy as they did last year. So until the vibes go straight to hell, might as well join the train and enjoy Robinson and Smith Rowe, both linking up very well.
Yep.
Look good. I think they have been some fun, cheap enablers as well because they're not very expensive. And yeah, I obviously beat because I wildcarded early. I beat the points, like the fact that they cost 4.6 and 5.6 respectively, and all this type of stuff. So they look good. I think Rogers was just because Aston Villa have some very nice fixtures going forward. Bukayo Saka, because I love him. I think Arsenal have looked very good. They've impressed me more than the Spurs have in terms of how they dealt with the Aston Villa away game. And I thought that Spurs have kind of been a bit meh. Like, there's an Everton side that's like marred with injuries. So I expect that's why I benched both players. I had no belief whatsoever that we're going to win the game. So I have a feeling they're going to take it to Spurs. I don't think they're going to beat City, but then after that, Leicester at home, Southampton at home, Bournemouth away. I love those fixtures. Yes, 9, 10, 11 for Arsenal look terrible, but 3 to 8 look manageable. And I think, considering the fact that Saka has been going, scored against Wolves and got an assist, and got very unlucky not to score against Aston Villa because Martinez forced a really good save. So I like what I've seen of him. I like some of his fixtures going forward. He feels like a premium sort of midfielder to have. Cole Palmer I brought in because, again, Chelsea's fixtures look very decent until probably the 8-10, no, 8-11 there, where it's Liverpool away, Newcastle home, Man United. Like, because he's so expensive as well, I could easily shift him into someone else and all this type of stuff. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. That's the one cool thing about having some of these premium players is that it gives me the flexibility to swap things out if they get injured or whatever. So big fan of that. I think Van de Ven simply because I think in terms of attacking stuff, he could do more than Romero. But I still like Romero because the only thing is that Van de Ven can score and assist. Romero's just gonna score a header if he does score it. So I'm a little bit stuck between the two, but I feel that Van de Ven is just I just think he's a awesome player,
He's also
generally
cheaper,
speaking.
no?
So
Romero's 5, isn't he?
is Romero five?
I
If
think
he
so.
is five, then
Yeah.
never mind.
Yeah.
Let me double check here.
Pretty sure he's 5. He was last season at
Romero
least.
five, yeah,
Yeah.
actually, yeah, he is five.
Yeah.
Okay, well then, yeah, I'll probably stick with Van de Ven.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think his potential is beyond goal scoring with assist and stuff too, and super fast and all this type of stuff. So I really like the looks of him. Rico Lewis, I should have gotten a goal. I am still annoyed about that. I finally saw the goal they conceded. Again, feel hard done by that because it was I think Ederson could have done better there. Um, but yeah, you know what? Until I hear Kyle Walker starting to play again, which I don't think he will. Like I think he's
Mhm.
definitely gonna be a bench. Famous last words, but I think he's gonna be a bench warmer for City because like since the Euros final, like his stock couldn't have been lower. Like I thought he wasn't that great towards the tail end of the season. I still think Rico Lewis has so much potential, and unless they want like a Cole Palmer situation where a player leaves, like he needs to start getting minutes, and I think Lewis will get those minutes, and I like what I've seen of him so far. I mean, played 90 minutes in both games, to be fair to him. Then, in terms of the rest of the team, like Price, I still have because he seems to be playing consistently, and unless I find out that he's leaving or anything, seems to be okay. Jebison seems like one of those guys who's going to consistently get garbage minutes, so I guarantee my 1 point because I have a little bit more premium players. Juan Pedro, again, looks good,
Yeah.
is on penalties.
Plays every
Like,
minute now as well. Should be crazy.
yeah. And he's going to play Ipswich and Nottingham Forest, of course. Ferguson is slowly making his way back, but I am sure Welbeck's going to be the one who gets sacrificed. But
Yeah.
what do I know? In terms of any of the other players that have failed to mention, I think it's like Rogers, obvious reasons, cheap enabler, passed the eye test, and all this type of stuff. Um, the Aston, I'm stuck between Aina and the Aston Villa defender, but I don't know. I actually don't know because I'm a little bit uncertain. Like it feels like a Kwanzaa situation, just ready to blow up in my face again. So I'd
Yeah.
rather, I mean, I say I'd rather go with someone more safe, and then I pick Olaina. But again, Olaina, I think, is slowly proving himself to, yeah, he looks good. He's
Yeah.
playing well. Played well in the previous game. Playing Wolves as well. Seems like a decentish fixture to have him for. And in terms of fixtures, just generally speaking, yeah, I'll bench him against Liverpool away. I mean, I can play Juan Pedro then. I will play Pedro over him in the Brighton game. Fulham at home being a two is crazy to me. I don't think that's a two at all. But they have a good run of fixtures, and luckily, I won't have to play four defenders always going forward. It's most
Right.
likely going to be three, and Aina may be getting a start over a Robinson or Van de Ven, depending on the match types and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think generally speaking, team has a lot better balance in terms of the defense. It is still very premium in terms of the fact that I have Salah, Palmer, and Saka in my midfield, and
Yeah.
that means that I've gotten rid of Isak. The only thing that I'm now considering is whether I mix things around to get Ollie Watkins in or look into what other options I have, but I kind of like the team as it is.
Yeah.
I just wish I had point one more so I could just change Aina to a 4.5 defender that I know will start.
Yeah.
For example, like a console or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think I know the thing there is just the fact that they brought in Alex Moreno, who could play left back or is prospected to play left back. They could play Olaina on the right, but that leaves Nico Williams out of the team. So, Neko Williams, I should say, not the Athletic Bilbao winger. So, yeah, I think there's just too much worry with those guys. So, I think if I went for a Forest defender, it would probably be one of the center backs, but they are 4.5, so you can't really afford them with this current team. My one big gripe with the team, the one player that I wish you had, I really like the team in general. I am pretty jealous that you have this team, but obviously I'm going to say my wildcard just a little bit more. But I think Trent Alexander-Arnold is the one guy that is sticking out to me. He's looked so good. Liverpool have amazing fixtures like we've seen. He's been unlucky not to get more points so far. So I think he's someone that I would prioritize getting into the team. I would probably drop down. Personally, I would sell Saka to someone, maybe not Jota now that Chiesa is coming in, but maybe someone like Mbeumo, for example. Drop Saka to Mbeumo, and then you have enough money to do pretty much any defender up to Trent. It could even be Nedeljkovic up to Trent Alexander-Arnold, or Van de Ven up to Trent Alexander-Arnold. And then you have a bit of a more balanced squad. You can get any defender you want. If Guardiola all of a sudden becomes super good, you don't have to do several transfers to bring him in. You can just sell Trent if he doesn't look as good, or if his fixtures turn a bit. Or if you want an Arsenal defender from those fixtures in what is it, gimmick 4-6 onwards. If you want an Arsenal defender at that point, you do have Raya, to be fair. Then you could also downgrade Trent. But I think Trent is just a really good player in general, so I would probably prioritize bringing him in rather than having 3 premium midfielders personally. But that's just my thoughts. I don't know. What do you think about Trent? Is he someone that you have considered a lot? Is he someone that you would like to have? I assume you would, but he's expensive. So how do you match that up, Trent versus having an extra premium midfielder? Like, how do you match that up against each other?
I mean, part of me is quite intrigued by having Robertson as well. I think Robertson has been super unlucky not to get more points and has actually looked more advanced positions than Trent. It's just that Trent is so good at spamming crosses that eventually one of them goes in.
He's super involved as well. Like, he's so attacking, like getting shots, getting crosses, getting passes.
So another way of looking into it is potentially maybe if I cheapen some stuff out and get Robbo, and that is a very realistic and very real.
I mean, but how would you do that though? You would have to drop Raya, I guess, to 4.5, because otherwise you'd have to drop Salah, Palmer, Saka, or Haaland, because there's not much money left in the rest of the team.
Yeah, so if I, knowingly, none of my defenders are, all my defenders are 4.5 and stuff like that, but Raya is technically, what is he? He's 5.5. I get 1 million if I go for Henderson, for example, if we have some remote belief that, or whatever the 4.5 goalkeeper that I go for.
Yeah.
That gives me 1.4, I think, which is really annoying, considering the fact that Robbo is
1.5.
6. So
yeah.
But
I mean, Konate was another player that you did mention previously, because he looks like the main guy now that Konsa's not starting. People are not talking about Konate, but he has shown some goal threat in the past as well. I remember like Champions League, like two or three seasons ago, he scored every single knockout stage, it felt like, from a header. So
the thing about Konate is he's very much like Romero. If you get a goal in, great, but you really want the fullbacks who look like they can produce something every week. And
for sure.
Will likely keep clean sheets. Like Liverpool have good fixtures. Like I said, they're gonna probably look good under Arne Slot, and that's what I said in the review, that this guy seems like a seamless addition to Liverpool. So, I mean, to be fair, this is the biggest test that he's gone so far. So let's kind of see how he handles that. And I think with United's sort of disappointing loss to Brighton, even though I don't think it's that disappointing, but United fans be United fans. I don't see past Liverpool conceding in that regards too, because I can see them conceding away at Old Trafford. So, like a part of me feels that Konate, I need to try and go either for 1 million more in Robbo or potentially, yeah, yeah. It's a tough one because even if I bring in Mbuemo and get in Trent, Mbuemo's next fixtures kind of suck.
Yeah.
And Saka's ones aren't that much better. However, the difference there is Saka plays for the better team.
Yeah.
So
He
like
can be good
you
in any
gotta,
game.
and obviously there's a reason why he's 10 million and all this type of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could also. I mean, the only thing I think with the way you have structured your team is the fact that making transfers in the future, you don't really have any options other than selling the super expensive players, whether that's Saka or Palmer. Anyway, so it feels like they're just there on borrowed time because you can't play with all of them. I mean, you could just stick with the same team every single game week, but you don't really have much wiggle room unless you drop one of those players eventually, because the rest of the squad is just not worth anything pretty much in terms of the money that they are worth in the game. So that's my
Hmm.
only issue here. But I do kind of like you could also just go with his team and then potentially sell Saka next week when he has tougher fixtures. Get someone like Mitoma, for example, for a cheaper price who has good fixtures from next week onwards, for example, or West Ham like Kudus, for example, who could have decent fixtures coming up. You could have that like a 1 week punt just to have Saka at home to Brighton, because that is a really nice fixture. I really like him for that fixture for what it's worth. Even though I would probably drop him if I was on a wildcard myself. I think that fixture is really good. So you could go with like a 1 week punt sort of thing as well. Or just like have it as like a baseline. And if Saka bangs again, you probably just want to keep him because Arsenal, like you said, can beat any team. Especially if they're not Man City, which is not the case in Game Week 4 anyway, because they're facing Newcastle or Spurs or whatever it is.
Spurs, yeah.
Spurs, yeah. He scored. Didn't he score like a goal and an assist against Spurs last season as well? I think
Yep.
in that game.
And
So,
I'm pretty
so
sure I
yeah.
had
So
both him and Havertz. So yeah.
I don't mind it. I just think that eventually you're gonna have to sell one of the 4 premium players, and you said that you're gonna keep it going with Haaland and Salah. So maybe that's the case. But yeah, I just think eventually we're gonna have to sell some of them. But for this week, and seeing as Salah is like the main guy, at least for me, he is the main guy you would have out of those 4 premium players, and he has the worst matchup out of the 4. So I sort of get it. You just have flexibility to sell one of them in the next few game weeks and get a lot of money in that way. So I don't really mind it from that perspective. But yeah. I guess if you had transfers saved up, you could have had 2 transfers for next game week and just downgraded Saka and upgraded Trent next week. But you have 0 free transfers, or you have 1 free transfer only next game week. But you could also do -4 to do that move, potentially to get Trent in those really tasty fixtures from game week 4 onwards, and drop down someone like Saka or Palmer depending on what happens, or potentially even Haaland if he doesn't look that good eventually. But yeah, those are just some of my thoughts when it comes to your wildcard team. Let's look at my wildcard team, because I do a wildcard team every single week in my weekly wildcard draft series, which I do every single week. And this is the wildcard team for this week. And I would say Jota, much higher stock before the Chiesa news. He's still a really good player, I think, especially for the next few game weeks. Chiesa's going to take some time to get into the squad. So I think Jota can play and be the starter against Man United, Nottingham Forest, and Bournemouth if he keeps away from injuries. So I still think he's a really good option to have. I also have Semenyo, who you think will blank against Everton. Fair enough. That's your favorite team. I really like Semenyo, so he's my favorite differential, like cheap pick, apart from Rodgers, who I've misspelled here as well. But yeah, I also have Trent in defense, because I don't have that super expensive midfield. I still have Palmer, though. I still have Haaland. I still have Salah. So I think it's a pretty good team in general. I also have Pau Torres from Aston Villa as more of a safe option. And I gone with Henderson in goal, because I think Arsenal and Raya have been sort of lucky to keep clean sheets so far, but they are really good, and Raya is such a good goalkeeper that he gets those save points and bonus points, so I understand it. I'm not completely sold on Henderson. As you can see, he's the 13th pick, so I don't really like him that much. But anyways, my thoughts on this team have been pretty extensive. You can watch the video for that if you want to see more in terms of my thoughts about all of these players individually, from Salah at number 1 to Valdemar Son at number 15. But for you, it's pretty similar to your squad, I guess. There are some notable changes. Obviously, the big one is not having Saka, so you can spread the money around. But what do you feel about this Wildcard team in general? And what do you also feel about me now, sort of getting Haaland back again after dropping him last week?
You're a bitch. That's what you are. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, team looks good. Obviously, like you said, Jota's sort of on question mark a little bit, but I think it's fair to still say it. He's sick. Like, I don't think
in the short term he's really
this
good.
is. I still think that Chiesa is the one who's making a mistake, not Liverpool. It's great for Liverpool to have a player of his quality, but Chiesa should be going to a club where he's the starter. So,
No.
yeah, I think it's a bit of a sideways move for him, especially when Luis Diaz looks really good, Jota looks really good, Salah looks really good. Are you meant to be benching one of those three to start? No. Um, is it perfect rotation to have Gakpo come in and potentially Darwin Nunez to come in for those other two players? Yes. Yes. Does this mean that Salah can maybe get more rest towards end of games? Maybe, yeah. And that might be why Chiesa was brought in. But then that leaves a bunch of other players a little bit vulnerable to not getting minutes. So it's for me it's an additional headache. I understand that Chiesa has the sort of like potential to be like one of the like sons of the Premier League sort of thing, like a player that's just outstandingly good, can finish with both feet, has that X factor about them, but it makes no sense when a team that's playing so well and has this level of consistency to to bring in someone who's slightly injury prone when they already have injury prone players and then might be riding the bench for most of it. It's a weird one. So I think Jota for the until he does his hamstring like he always does. Good choice over there. I think generally speaking, the team is looking fine. Um, yeah, I think I can't really say much because you amended the thing that I didn't like, which was not having Holland. And if anyone, God forbid, anyone did your team be like, oh, I'm going to listen to this guy. Yeah, well, I was not going to do shit, and then scored a hat trick.
I did say there was a chance he gets a hat trick, but I think over the long haul, I think you could spread the money around. But obviously, I've changed my mind on that.
Yeah, 100%. Because you're like, oh, he's going to score every single goal against West Ham. You should captain him. So yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think he's still like the best captain's option this week. Probably Salah next game week in year 4, but yeah, there is a case to be made to sell Haaland when he faces Arsenal and Newcastle and those types of teams. But you're going to want him back at some point as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how people navigate the Salah Haaland thing. You said that you want to keep both of them for the entirety of the season. That might be the best tactic. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's interesting. Earlier in the podcast, you did mention an Ipswich defender with the name of either Leif or whatever Davis. In this team, I actually have an Aston Villa defender in Pau Torres, who I kind of like better than Consta for some reason. And I also have Jacob Greaves from Ipswich, who's, in my opinion, potentially the best 4.0 defender, just because of the fixtures that they have and his set-piece threat. But you could also switch that if Nedeljkovic now is going to be the starter for Aston Villa the next few game weeks. You could switch that and have Nedeljkovic from Aston Villa as a 4.0 defender and then upgrade Greaves to Leif Davis as a 4.5 defender. You mentioned him at the start of the podcast. He hasn't really been mentioned much elsewhere either. Do you think he is a viable option, especially looking at the fixtures for Ipswich? Do you think that's potentially something you could do here as well?
Yeah.
Could you have him over Van de Ven, for example, in your team? No? You like Van de Ven with the fixtures that they have?
Not really. I just like Van de Ven.
Newcastle away, Arsenal at home, Brentford at home, Man United away, Brighton away.
Yeah, it's not the greatest matches.
Yeah,
so I could go with him. Yeah, potentially, and then have continue having Nedeljkovic, but I don't know. I like Van de Ven.
No, I mean Van de Ven.
I don't know. I don't know. I'll see how I feel. I feel like Van de Ven's going to score against Arsenal. That's mainly why I have him.
Okay.
This
Bold
just
prediction.
seems the type.
Okay, fair enough. We'll see.
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
those.
I think my whole thing could change because that could easily, Van de Ven could easily become Trent as well. So
Yeah, yeah, that's fair enough. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with your team in the end. I'm going to be there when you choose your team because I'm going to go to London. That's my next piece of my agenda. I'm going to go right after this podcast, actually, which we recorded now on Wednesday for reference, because this is going to be posted on Friday or even potentially Thursday night. But yeah, my next order of business is going back home to my parents' house to pack some stuff because I'm going to leave for London tomorrow morning, and I'm going to be with Kevin and the rest of the crew in London there for the next week. And it works out well because it's the international break, so I'm going to get a bit of a break from FPL content as well. So this is actually going to be the final video in about a week, and then we'll be back on the Monday after the international break, I guess, leading up into Game Week 4 pretty much. So that is the plans for the future of the podcast, or the future of the content on this channel, basically. I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. And as always, going to leave the last word for Kevin to have something to say once again.
Nkunku is a lot better pick than people want to give him credit for. Fuck all of you guys if he goes crazy.
Oh, bring him back then on the wildcard.
I might.
Bye-bye.